Well,
right.
You know what's most interesting about Voltaire, well, at least to the scientific community, is that he was actually the guy who popularized Newton in continental Europe. He was basically unknown before that, yeah.
Because a lot of people stumble upon ideas, a lot of people come up with ideas, but oftentimes it's not the person who comes up with the idea that popularizes it. And I have a book here from... what's his name? Well, I mean, I don't want to walk down the rabbit hole of that, but yeah, it's ultimately about the person who popularizes the idea, like Donald Scott right now. He reinvigorated the spirit of the Birkeland current, you know, and I'm sure it's not just him, but from my perspective, the type of didactics I appreciated is his doctiloquent speech. So and the way that he approaches it and gives credence to the giants on the shoulders of the people who really helped support and put a theory together, you know, and then went off of it and did the math, you know, some more math to bring it to relevance.
There is another thing I can tell you about this quote about standing on the shoulders of giants. So it's allegedly it was Newton, okay, who was saying that thing. But I've heard a really interesting version about it. So you might have heard that the law of gravitation was actually discovered by Robert Hooke. Ut tensio sic vis, he said, which means in Latin, like what kind of tension you have, that kind of strength you would have. This is the Hooke's law, but he was also discovered he had many letters written to Newton, right. And it is supposed that Newton kind of stole his idea of, you know, the universal law of gravitation. But so the story goes about this quote that it was on some of these, you know, sessions of the Royal Academy of Sciences or something, or maybe it wasn't created back then, that Hooke said, well, you know, Guy, you actually stole my idea. But Newton kind of sarcastically replied that, you know, oh, if I saw Father, it was because, you know, I was a dwarf who was standing on the shoulders of giants. But what it meant was that it was kind of, you know, kind of parodying Hooke's phrase, basically. So it was Hooke who was a dwarf, you know, and it was Newton who was a giant. And the most kind of salty thing here is that Hooke was actually a dwarf. He was he actually had a serious genetic illness. Yeah, I mean, you can read about it.
Yeah, I expect that Hooke's reply in that conference table was "fuck you." That's what he probably said to him, right to his face. Right. That's what I would have done. Or he better had that like a look on his face, like oh, you just didn't.
Yeah, but anyway, everything else I know about Newton kind of falls very well with this story, you know. So I would actually believe it's true.
Welcome to the February 18th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have a ton of friends on, maybe literally. It's a holiday for most of us today, and I put together a small collection of some of our recent talks that were too good to pass up, that just needed to get out there. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.
Yes,
okay, let's see. There's another one here.
There's another one forming right above my head as I'm driving home.
Yeah, there's
and it was in the same spot as the earlier one this morning.
So do we know what it is? What is it?
Yeah,
it's streak holes.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
They're called fall streak holes. It's like when you get a high strata cloud and a hole just blows out the center of it. They say that the ice crystals that form in the clouds get shifted around by planes landing. But this thing is huge. There's no way a plane or several planes can cause this thing because it's forming right now.
Yeah, this is the general action here.
Well, it's like the capacitance is they sort of short out between the two layers and it just falls away. That's kind of what it looks like.
By planes, but there's no way that the planes can be coming through.
No planes did that.
2 miles away, clouds are way up. They'd have to literally come straight down and then
there's a real
land.
Jeez,
is that amazing? Yeah,
I think that if we have the concept of the double layer in the sun and the sun idea, I mean, I'm not saying these are quote unquote Earth spots, but they probably serve a similar function between different layers in the atmosphere. Just a breakdown.
You see this curling that happens here?
I noticed that. Yes, I like that. That's the twisting, and notice how the whole thing sort of twists as it falls away too. Because if it is ice particles, because it looks kind of like that they are. I'm just thinking that they are. Then then them turning into wisps. That's what we see going across the road all the time. Those snow snakes. That's what we call them. But they turn into little wisps.
Really interesting.
It's like, we're leaving now. Bye.
Yeah, I wonder what the frequency of these are. You know, these are.
Can you guys see in my pictures?
That's what we're looking at.
I've got 2 of them. Did you put more?
Go! He's going live. Go watch him live. He's watching.
I'm doing live.
Oh man,
that's the one that's right now.
Okay.
Well, have these things been
crash? Sorry.
Have these things been talked about historically, or is this sort of a new kind of phenomenon?
Well, they're highly not understood. They're just like, they don't really know much about them, so there's really not much work been done on them.
But is there any reports from the past? I mean,
general consensus is that the airplane.
Sure. Yeah.
The consensus is that the airplanes fly through clouds and then can create the disturbance and turbulence, and it moves the ice crystals around in the clouds. But there's no way this could form like this. You can see there now. This is full. Been like almost live as we speak, and there's nothing going through it.
Cool.
And there's another one. There's another one down in the horizon. That's the one that was there earlier this morning. It is dissipated.
Man, 2 of them.
I think it's Thor. Thor blowing smoke rings.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some seismic activity here in the next couple of days.
Are they associated?
Well, just because of the charge. I mean, it looks like the charge is fixed in one spot because it's just making holes in the clouds, and then the clouds dissipate as they fly through it. And then it makes another hole sometime. So there's some heavy charge going into Salt Lake City right now.
Wow. It looks like another one forming here.
Right through the city. It's right on a hole.
Amazing.
I love that we're seeing it live.
Too bad I don't have a better camera. I just have my phone.
It's not bad.
No, it's good. It's good. It's authentic. That's so wicked. I didn't think that. I try to catch like those little dusty tornadoes when I went through across the United States, and I caught some videos of them. But I mean, until you can see something, I mean, you with your own eyes is one thing. The camera, you're right. I mean, there's some failings. Look at that beautiful one.
Yeah.
And they just fall right out. There's some ideas like what could be related to them, what causes them. But you can see how they pull together.
No, they do this. This action.
Funnel action. Yeah. Or the angel action almost. You know, because just the picture of, no, that's probably a fake. I don't trust that. That looks too.
That one looks a little bit maybe, but you know.
No. I think most of them are obviously real. The way that they work, it's just the way they work. They pull down to the center. It's like, hey, do you want to start a tornado? Sure. Oh no, we're good.
It's not. It's not even.
Camera now.
Well, no, it's just doing a little twist.
Doesn't have any of the dynamics of a tornado.
No, I didn't mean it like it was. It was sort of like that feeling, like, hey, we're gonna go into a twist and sort of start. Do you wanna? No. All right. Like it's like it doesn't have enough to do anything. It's just sort of like I have the impetus. Yeah, they're celebrating. Them. There you go.
It's a celebration of
the fall streak. Oh my god! The creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a nice way to start off the show, right?
Yeah, actually it is.
Hope you guys like that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Robert.
Didn't end in a car crash, so we're good.
No, I didn't. So I kind of kept my eyes on the road and hoped that the camera lens was at least seeing what I wanted you to see.
If you were to estimate, what would you say the diameter of that thing is?
Well, that's what I was saying. It's huge from the height that it is. I'm saying it's probably a good portion of the Salt Lake Valley.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Not just the city itself, but I'd say probably part of Murray, and it would take up Sugar House all the way down into Sandy area.
Man.
I mean, because it looks right now like it's hanging over Draper, and then it hangs over the South Mountain and goes into the Utah County area. But it's that far south. But if you were to like just drop it straight down, it would occupy a huge swath of land.
I
bet it would. Yeah.
I'd say at least maybe 5 miles by 12.
That's pretty big. Okay. That's higher than I thought.
Yeah.
Well, when I was asking about historical references, I was really thinking, did these exist before HAARP came on the scene? Or could it be a HAARP-induced thing?
I used to think that chemtrails were only existed like since '96, but I found some World War II pictures with chemtrails in them, so I didn't know what to think anymore. I kind of had to take a step back. But I'd be very interested in what I'm seeing here, because if they are... Because in the past, you're right, I don't know... I mean, would you paint those? Do you go out looking for those? Like, are there any sort of paintings of them, or depictions, or even descriptions?
You would think that if they were something that occurred with some regularity over the years, that somebody would have said something about them.
Especially with the Chicken Little story of the sky is falling. You'd freak out a little bit. You'd be like, dude, sky fall. No, that's just a cloud, dude.
I've been doing earthquake research recently, and there was a guy we worked with called Dong Choi, and he had noticed that earthquakes migrate northward during the solar minimum, and then they migrate back to the south when it goes away. And so that intrigued me, and so I started looking at the details. It starts about the same time that the North Pole starts accelerating northward. So what it looks like is as this current increases from the sun is charging, the earth is induced to charge, as that current increases, your magnetic pole starts to align closer to the rotational axis of the earth, which in atomic physics they call that synchronicity. And so your North Pole is synchronizing with the rotational axis, and that rotates everything to the north, including the earthquakes, because they're electronic. The earthquakes are tied to the electronics. So just to throw that out there, something recently we looked into, and I think that's how it really works, and why this North Pole is accelerating to the north. I don't think it's going to go on over to Siberia. I think it's just going to line up with the North Pole a little bit. Anyway, that's something we just recently seem to have uncovered. It's tied to what they call magnetic moment. If you've ever heard of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I was learning... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt there. That's a very interesting observation you made there, Bruce, and this is the first time that anybody at all gave an explanation for that moving pole, that magnetic North Pole, right? That's rapidly going towards Siberia. It's the first explanation I heard. Sounds plausible.
Yep, we're going to put that in this earthquake paper that we're publishing here in this summer. It'll be out this summer.
Right.
It's about New Madrid. And another thing that happens is it's tied to that Great Lakes vortex. That New Madrid fault runs right up into the Great Lakes, and basically it's spreading it open, and it reduces the pressure. So that pressure in that vortex heals off those polar vortexes right towards North America. If you notice, they line right up with the Great Lakes all the time, and that jet stream loops around it.
Right.
So that's what's really going on, man. There's your vortex connection to the tectonics.
Yeah, we months and months ago we noticed for the Great Lakes how they nicely curve up in a slight curvature, if you will. All those lakes, all the way across Canada from the Great Lakes upwards.
Tectonic vortex, I believe.
You know, those positions really look of those
lakes and stuff going out right along the Carolina Bays there. Go across the Great Lakes, up across through Alberta, and then to Great Slave Lake and Great Bear Lake up there in the Yukon and Northwest Territories. That part of a circle there sort of has that. Right around where I guess where that vortex is swirling out there seems to be about the center of it. Maybe
it's the Clipper, Alberta Clipper. They follow that train of lakes all the way to the Great Lake. You see that train of lakes you look at the Great Lakes and then go kind of northeast. There's a series of lakes all the way up there, and that's we call it a vortex street. But that's what those Clippers follow. And they peel off. They start over there in the Aleutians is where they kind of start. The Aleutian low. And then it peels off and comes right down and gives us a dose of cold ass. And that's going to get worse and worse over this solar minimum.
Anyway.
So you might want to move on down, Neil.
Oh, no, I'm okay. You see that green thing going right across there, you see? It going right along the bottom of New Brunswick? In Nova Scotia right there, that's where I'm at. And that's why they're freezing over there. And I'm not as cold right here, right now. Although I still can't go swimming like you can, you lucky bugger.
Where are you located?
I'm in New Brunswick, just on the border between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right
so you
past
get
Maine.
I see where the warm is coming through there.
The vortex is, I'm getting a little bit of, I'm getting a little heat from you guys. It's right there.
It's from Florida sunshine heat. Yeah, baby.
Oh, I love, with the summertime, it's great because, the heat goes, like the conveyor belt action comes right up the coast, right? And it's much nicer. But right now, the vortex sort of, as we were talking about, pushes down and, all that heat gets dumped out in, I guess, England? I guess somewhere over there.
No, all it does is take up a lot of moisture and cold along the way, and then it dumps it there in Europe where I am.
Take that.
Yeah.
You see that low pressure near Iceland? That Icelandic low, they call it?
Yeah.
That's part of your double delta circuit. That's tied to the Aleutians and that, I think the Lake Baikal. Anyway, I think there's a delta circuit in there somewhere.
I like how we're using wind speeds that they measure to actually look at, well, I guess we're calling them vortexes for lack of a better term, but Birkeland current footprints, maybe something like that. You can see where it starts breaking down from the bands that you would see like on Jupiter, like we have those weird bands. But to see it. Obviously, you could envision this looks like the South Pole of a chaotic Jupiter, like we saw with all those rings and stuff, those vortexes around it. But obviously, this is deeper into the atmosphere, and we're just seeing sort of like the footprints of these large currents. And obviously, they're not as bad as hurricanes or tornadoes. And they're much larger, but imagine the amount of if each one of those even have a modicum of charged particles, and you know they're rotating like that. Well, that's gonna create a magnetic field, wouldn't it?
You got that hexagonal there on the top of Jupiter, right? Same thing on. You got the hex circuit, double delta, I call it, but that's a hexagonal.
It's still beautiful because you know that. I mean, you can see the predominance. Of the circuit going around the planet, and how we know it reverses down near the equator and so forth. You can see it, at the top, the very top. You can see how it's going the opposite direction.
Is there a way to turn on different layers on this globe to see like the oceanic current and because
the different surface reads?
I think we can do an atmosphere, not ocean.
So this is the surface.
Surface of the top of the ocean.
Yeah, you can see the footprints there. Those are those ones that are that low that Bruce was talking about. Look at it right there. That's right down to the ground. That must be.
Yeah. If you want to go high, this is like the highest one that they've got.
That must be
okay.
Like
that's your jet stream.
That's like 70 kilometers. Or something.
Right.
Is that the stratosphere or beyond?
They do it in Pascal Pascal.
Pressure. Those are pressures.
Right.
So we can see that they're connected. Like you can see, I'm interested in the three-dimensionality of the vortices connecting all the way into the water, through the water, into the ground, into the oceanic currents to see if there's a similarity, well, or connection.
The closer you get to space, the more rarefied things are going to get. So they're going to get more ionized. So they're going to start following the laws of electromagnetism a lot more. As you start going down and down and down, the pressure increases. They get less and less ionized, and they are subject to, of course, wind and stuff. But you can still see the vortexes as you get closer. And once you get to the surface, to be perfectly honest, all bets are off because it's going to try to ground out. Like you have all that. Yeah, and it's still going to. I mean, it's going to. Well, if that vortex had current in it, in a general sense, it's going to try to connect that to through the water to like the coast of Iceland and the coast of Greenland. There, for example.
What's the time scale on this that
we're seeing? Explain why the wind is so fast right there. But anyway,
is that the 2 hours time scale? What's the time scale we're seeing here?
I don't think we have a time scale.
I believe, I mean, my understanding of it is it's a read of velocity, so it's live. So that's my understanding.
Right.
Back up, it might change the time on
it. Well, yeah, I think that we're not actually seeing things move. We're just seeing those lines represent the velocity of wind. I think when they move. I think.
Right, but my question was I understand it's probably live, but it's probably circuits from the past, maybe 2 minutes or minute or 20 minutes. I don't know how.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
How often do they get the samples, and how do they? Yeah.
I think it's a model. I think it's a model tied to what they call their general circulation model.
Okay.
Yeah, updated with data. Yeah, they probably have some data to throw in there, of course, obviously, because they get some pretty good curves.
Take the model with the data, but yeah.
Typically, you'll see.
But they probably only have to update it every hour. Like they just get all the sensors come in, they look around, they update them all, and then they make an update of this model, and they just do that because I mean that's a lot of calculations when you get right down to it. So,
is there fire cycles and fire or sand cycles in this from the deserts? I didn't know how deep this what is it, null school goes.
It's generally this pressure, the range. So they're calling it surface, and then as Neil was saying, these are different levels of pressure as you go up.
Right, but I guess my question was, is there a site, if this one doesn't offer it, that we can see the live fires that are going across the globe? Like you can see live lightning, and you can see because fires have a cycle that they do around the Earth, just like most other things. They're all cyclical, and also there's the Sierra desert storms of dust storms that go up and seed the different areas. I didn't know if this one offers that, or if we could find that on a different one, because those cycles ultimately pollinate the ocean and the plankton in the ocean and the plankton cycles. So that's all interesting to me because it's all life. We could start seeing cycles of life based off of these circuits.
You're actually not wrong. There is a definite. Oh, I love that we can see that. But apparently, sunspot cycles and other things, and cosmic rays affect algae blooms and stuff like that. I don't know this pattern, but I'm sure there must be one.
It's from the dust storms, actually, from the Sahara, feed the plankton blooms.
Well, look at by the way, interesting fact. Look at the aurora, and isn't that where that vortex is? Literally where the aurora is strongest right now. If we look down right there along right where that
Where that right between
like it was,
Iceland and Greenland, that aurora is incredibly strong right there.
If that's a live model that we were watching earlier.
And you wonder why I want to go to Greenland or Iceland all the time, because, you could look southwards and see the northern lights. Tickets
there are so cheap. You can go there and back for so cheap, but it's expensive once you're there.
That's true, but it's still beautiful.
Yeah, I want to go. I've never been.
The feature you're looking at, the fat part usually points to the nighttime side. So Africa would be nighttime in this particular instance, and daytime would be over there by Alaska.
Is that just because we can't read it as much because there's because it's light out, or does it cycle more towards the night?
It just the fat part stays to the night side.
Huh.
It's just the characteristic of it.
So it likes the cold. So I would assume. I heard that electricity prefers and can work faster through cold, right? Through ice, or it's just what I heard. I'm not sure. Does electricity in any way prefer cold or cold environment?
It prefers dry.
If you look at that shape, it's like a hoop that's jumping off the sun in a coronal mass ejection. It has that same shape. And
the two footprints?
Well, when you get a big hoop that spins off the sun, the little small pinch on the daytime side is the hoops that are tied to the sun. So it's the same type of situation. They point towards the sun. If you look at the models they have, the time series models they have, you'll see how that I played one in one of my videos. I don't remember which one it is, but
did you guys hear the news recently that an earthquake created a bunch of gold?
Yep.
Is that true? And I also heard that they created a bunch of gold accidentally in one of the colliders. But Neil, that's really interesting to me. I didn't get to read too much into the story. Did you get any info on that?
I just was going with what Eugene was talking about, monatomic gold in laboratories, and the making or transmutation of gold. And then when I heard that it was, they found it was made. Another bunch of gold was made in an earthquake. I was like, I almost wanted to go, surprise! How else do you think gold is made? Because only because it comes in veins and is surrounded by crystals, of quartz in this case. What do you want me to think? That's what I'm thinking. That's my first thought. Very first thought is so the gold inside the sand was suddenly pulled out or transmutated and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But Edwin would know more about how that
are they
works.
attributing it? Are they attributing it to pressure? Or are they attributing it to
pressure and heat more than likely, of course.
Yeah, it's an article that floats about. Do earthquakes create gold and all that? But in the end, it's an hypothesis of how the forces of the earthquake somehow collect the gold in the veins instantly, or
somehow
something together. They don't even imply transmutation, I believe. I do.
So this spawns off.
Go ahead.
This spawns off a question that I have for Bruce. There's a huge copper mine here in Michigan, and everybody's talking about it's like the purest copper you can get anywhere in the world. It's like 90% copper, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm hearing about missing copper that was mined here thousands and thousands of years ago, or whenever. It's just missing, and then we find it in different places in the world. I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
Not really, no.
Or anyone else?
I can speak to that a little bit. What you mentioned is, I believe, a truthful fact, accepted, acknowledged, if you will. And copper mining is mentioned in a lot of places, like enigmatic places far away. but they found copper with the right isotopic ratio and whatnot back in Europe. So it's often speculated exactly who did that and why they did that. Could have been the Phoenicians or some other group there or before that. And if you look at DNA in the Native Americans around that area, around the Great Lakes, there is DNA there that's European DNA, if you will, implying a European connection from long ago.
They did find some ancient people around the last ice age down here in Florida that had flint with them from France.
Yeah. Yeah, the Solutrean hypothesis, for example. Yeah.
How do they verify that?
It's like it comes from a particular place that the ratio, what they call the Venn diagram of the chemistry, is very specific to a location.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that whole potential shift in history is really profound, of course, you know.
Do we know how copper is formed in veins? Or do we assume in the electric paradigm or from electric view that it's formed in the same way that gold might be formed in earthquakes? Or I don't really know much about copper, but living here in Michigan, I've always felt like there was some sort of an antenna or a tune, like, you know, Edison, the cars, the Motown, techno, just like a lot of stuff happens here. It's a place of novelty.
Hydrothermal venting is one of the things that are blamed for a lot of metallic production. Like they get the manganese nodules on the seafloor and that are associated with quartz veins. So hydrothermal venting has been proposed as a large source. Maybe there's other ways of doing it. You know, hydrothermal venting would be electric, though. Could be a slow electric process. It doesn't have to be one instantaneous thing. It could be constant electricity because the Earth is always pulsing electrical energy. So it could be a slow type plating process. Crystal growth.
Are they called like low? I mean, I know we call them telluric currents, but is there just a bunch of different low frequencies and like energies moving through the Earth at all times? Is there a scale or a diagram we can see for that?
There's some guys in Italy that can monitor EM activity all over the globe with it's kind of a directional array for real low frequency, and they're picking up. They can tune it to an area and pick up the EM emissions before an earthquake occurs. So there's EM energy always running around the Earth. It's hard to know where it's coming from all the time, but
you're mentioning in some of the stuff you've been sharing the outgoing long wave radiation and those as precursors. Could you expand on those a little bit? Or it's really interesting to me, and like how you would measure it and what
they're finding with these earthquakes is they're finding precursors, and what they call the total electron content stacks up. It thickens. That's the ionosphere, and you're also getting infrared radiation coming from the Earth. It's in different layers sometimes, and then all of a sudden you get a cooling right before an earthquake, and then they're finding changes in jet stream patterns. There's one guy in Taiwan that's what he's been doing for years, and he has a way of seeing these pinches, like a Z pinch, really, in the jet stream, and he'll zero in on where he thinks an earthquake's going on with that. Then you get the earthquake lights. And then right before the earthquake, you get changes in like radio frequencies, changes in cell phone transmission. Animals have weird behavior. There's a lot of association.
There should be an app or something. If our phones can see through walls and see the planks in the walls, like with just apps and all these other different types of apps. I know you might be working on stuff similar to this already, and might already have the solution. But to me, when you were talking just now, it gave me some ideas of thinking that, how animals can sense that, and they start running. and with many different types of danger. Is there a way that we can build an antenna on a human so that we can sense that, or have that whatever type of sense they're picking up? I just watched this article. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, there's another group that's picking up changes in what they call ultrasound emissions, which is a high frequency. You might be able to pick up those with a phone, but these long wavelength radio waves, I doubt you could pick that up with a phone. These arrays have to be like tens of kilometers apart to pick up these low frequency.
Do you have any hypothesis as to how the animals pick up this sense at all? Because
they say even since humans can pick it up, so it's must probably through the endocrine system. Probably sense the way I don't really know. Or
yeah, I was thinking somewhere with the gut, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a vibration. Ultrasound is a high. What the ultrasound changes from it just changes its frequency, the pitch. So as the Earth internally heats, it shifts the range of the ultrasound, and the Italians have been monitoring that for a while. They've got some algorithms that calculate it. Maybe that's what the animals may be picking up on that, but I'm not sure exactly what they're picking up on or how they pick it up.
So Eugene, how's the preparation for the trip to New Mexico going? Is it coming together? Are you looking forward to the trip?
Yeah, but I have a problem with the presentation. In particular, it's becoming very, very long. I mean, I would have to cut something out, which I would really hate to do, but I would have to.
Okay.
You could practice speed speaking.
No, that's according to my experience, this is already beyond my limits. So.
No, I understand. I've seen that happen more than once. So yeah. It's best to fit the time frame better, and you're not cutting anything out. Even
how long do you have?
So Ben wants it to be 55 minutes, but I mean I have 1 hour available, so I'll take 1 hour.
Someone else could get that 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get ready, and I'll just walk right off stage, and you get back on. There you
go. There's Michael Claridge after me. I'll deal with him somehow.
Lots of apologies. I'm sorry, buddy. Here's a beer.
Did everybody catch Sky Scholar last night?
Negatory. No.
I've been meaning to watch it. I haven't yet.
Oh yes. It's a big deal.
Is it? Oh wow.
Yeah. That's the best. And he says this will probably be the most important episode I ever do on this channel.
Oh man,
it's a big,
I'll check it now.
It's a big deal. Yeah. And the paper in the description is the big deal, but also the satellite dish that you can see it there, that the angle, that's the entire point. I'll shut up and let it.
No, please, because I'm not going to send a sound.
It is tomorrow, or it is next week, the 10th.
Yeah, okay.
Put the captions on.
Okay.
Oh, how do you do that? Oh, here we go. Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. So just as far as the process goes, it works better to give us a lead in, Shifu.
Well, I'm telling you, it's going to explain itself. He'll put up every paper on here, and basically this satellite picked up no cosmic background radiation.
Whoa! So, really?
Yes.
See, I know exactly how. Okay, so Penzias.
You'll see. He's going to put it all on the screen.
Yeah,
that's just a monument. That's not the way it's supposed to originally point.
No, obviously, no. But I know what they were doing with this darn thing, and they were. This is 67 point Kelvin. Yeah, okay. And it's all this wonderful microwave background radiation that was the tech way back when, and to see them challenge this, his basic theory was that it was basically coming from the water of the Earth. This was Robitaille's idea, and this might be vindication of that.
That he's about to go into that. Here he's giving all the history, the previous paper that was cited and all that. He's setting it up because he's done a good job of setting everything up already. Of course, he's given those wonderful talks at the conference, and he has all these papers, and it's just he set it all up beautifully because he's done all of the videos on thermodynamics. He's done like 6 videos, 6 or 7 of them. A few of them have the experiments right in the video, and now he's breaking it down. These are the papers that reference, but he's going and he's talking about the a priori, like this is where the prediction was made, and then the other paper, which came out later, then didn't have that measurement in it, and so
it was the same issue of the journal. They're literally like next to each other.
So this is proving that there's no cosmic microwave background?
Yeah, here you're gonna find. So apparently a few weeks ago, somebody helped him stumble onto this. I'm not sure how it happened, but he discovered this guy's work and then dug through the web somehow. He got in touch with everybody, and they managed to actually scrounge up. And in the description of the video is the actual paper. It was published, but somehow never ended up on the Internet Archive for the journal.
Of course.
And this was 2007 that it was published. But the man sat on the data for 10 years. He had sent it out to everybody. He sent
something that totally falsified.
Yes.
Was sat on. They hid it.
Yes.
This is what they do to. It makes me.
It was in a journal. It was in a journal, but it was a foreign journal. So unfortunately, the Royal Society did not.
Yeah, it's not popular with them for sure.
Well, right, because it invalidates something that they're trying very hard to keep, like as if it had to be there.
So, what implications does this have on the
foundation of the model ultimately?
Yeah. Well, it definitely validates his idea that it goes a long ways, at least, to validating his idea that you can't create a thermal spectrum without a lattice. He's going hard with that in this video, and he's using Professor Haruni's work here to demonstrate, because of the shape of the antenna. He's going to demonstrate it here in a second. He was just recounting WMAP and Planck and how they couldn't quite do what everybody expected, and they were borrowing data from each other's sets in order to fill in the gaps and etc. And so this is the actual.
Wow.
So it's a beautiful, really inspirational. And so
it's also a perfect example of not stating your assumptions, or at least not being aware of the assumptions that were made. Like, we assume this came from space. Like,
it's not clear why the Soviets built the shape, but maybe it was for the purpose of looking at the cosmic background, and I'm not really sure. It's in defunct. They're trying to store the antenna, but you can see there it's not easy for ocean signals to come in and stay inside and get into the horn. So like this.
I see what they were doing. Low angle and basically very high attack. It's deep. I see what they were using it for. So you could only see the sky, basically, pretty much.
But one of the points of Robitaille was that this signal from the ocean gets scattered in the atmosphere, so it should come from all angles. So
yeah, I think that is definitely an issue that he needs to look at, because there's water in the atmosphere everywhere. So, but maybe some of the noise, maybe it's attenuated somehow. I don't know how he would answer that.
That's very.
And also what kind of
there it is right there. So it's only 2.6 Kelvin. So that's the main point right there. The antenna self noise was only 2.6 Kelvin instead of 6 Kelvin. So it needs validation, obviously, and there's a whole zip file. There's a whole zip file in the description of a whole series of data. So there's not just the paper, but there's a whole packet.
Well, that would be pretty amazing, actually, because I see what he's implying, and this is again another. Well, as what was it? Dr. Donald Scott used to say, these are not just anomalies; these are death blows. It's like one after another that you're like, if you falsified redshift and you falsified relativity bending light and you falsified cosmic microwave background, then what the frack is left? Like, how much do you have to stand on now with your big exploding universe bomb theory? I mean, Big Bang.
Well, they'll hold on to it. They'll hold on to it until there's like some noise about it. I mean, talking about noise. There's got to be.
That's our job.
Yeah, exactly.
We are the noise.
Yeah.
Right.
The noise becomes signal.
By electricity alone, I set my mind in motion. Is that what you're saying?
We'll just have to make. We'll have to make. We'll have to make 5 Kelvin of noise.
Oh, yeah. 7 or 12 is good.
So I love that he provides the director's address. Yeah, I'm sure he's going to get a little slightly flooded, but it's really great too that the man went through the effort of finding the hard copy for them and helping them to rectify, because the journal archive not being complete. That is slightly suspicious, but it is the internet, I mean, it was 1999, things happen.
Well, yes, but it's like,
I guess
what was his name? It was Burbage, Jeffrey Burbage, he was the astronomer, and he was discussing something, and it was another astronomer named Verna something. Unfortunately, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. And she was studying stars and based on the light spectrum, and she started noticing certain things about them, like that shouldn't be true if they were all randomly distributed. And I can't remember exactly what she was pointing to, but because it was very specific. But they all went around the table, and one prominent guy said, "Well, we should probably stop funding because obviously she's wrong, so we should just discard this and stop now." And then everyone in the table sort of agreed, and Jeffrey Burbage said, "But since I had the last word, I ignored them. But I saw exactly what they were doing here and how the idea of protecting a cherished theory is more it's basically makes you feel better about being right, and there's a groupthink aspect to it, this concision. And we got to remember this concision stuff started before we even had psychology, so we should probably put in some more safeguards as opposed to just a bunch of guys in the room think it's a good idea. I mean, we know that the scientific theory is supposed to be tested, but when you're at this level where testing it is untenable almost, it might be able to be tested. Like, this is the limit we're looking at here with microwave background radiation and because to test it, you had to throw a satellite into space to see if you were right. And when they did throw a satellite into space and they got a different result, they just decided to just shut up about it. Like, that's just, like, could you imagine the guy that got fired over that? Like, you imagine some guy who's like, no, we should test it. It'll be perfect. And then it's like, nope, and your name will be stricken from the record. You will never be spoken of again. The theory must be more important than the facts. God damn it.
When you build this type of edifice around everything, it's no matter what the narrative is, the edifice, fundamentally the edifice needs to be protected, and that's where it's a problem as far as like seeking truth,
Yeah, but the other problem is that we don't actually have any facts. If you look at it closely, any fact is already it's already an interpretation by using some theory. You cannot have theory-free facts, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah,
and then where are you?
And even more to the point, we don't really have any we have faith in the scientific method, and we have faith in the laws of thermodynamics, etc. And to some degree, and
I was going to say
we can't really escape. We can't really escape observation. Even in biomedical sciences, they've tried to eliminate empiricism, and I think to a great detriment, because the science goes the other way. The harm that can be caused that way is very great. But to some degree, how can you really ever get rid of the fact that we're interpreting everything through the electromagnetic spectrum? Even what comes to our ears is translated into electrical signals. So we're always going to be stuck with a certain amount of I don't know if it's called it blind faith, but it's some kind of faith. And I agree with Eugene when we just don't know. We don't know in the way that we assume that we have knowledge. I don't think. That's just my feeling about that.
Right. The sensibility, senses, etc. They're of the potential set. It's a very small, conceptually a small window. Yeah.
As I'm sure my inability to actually think about everything and know everything is impossible, I still feel as if there is a true way to attack one's, or at least be like hyper aware perhaps of one's own biases to the point that you can make, well, in the Aristotelian idea of making the mind sharp like a knife, like and I although there is a bit of idealism in that, I recognize, but I think it's still a noble goal, as opposed to I mean, when someone goes, "Well, just fill in the gaps with faith," I find that those are where the anomalies, to me, like I want to know more about the anomaly. I want to know why that is that way.
I'm not dogging it, by the way.
No, I didn't think you were. I just fully feeling. Like I said, I don't have a direct. I mean, I fully grasp on that. But
the unity of inductive and deductive science. I really fully believe in that. Like I mentioned about the U.S.GS meeting I went to, a lot of deductive science is going on, but not a lot of inductive science is going on. And the use of intuition has been profoundly important in scientific history, if anybody really makes a study of it. So the ability to have flashes of sight and enlightenment moments, and even dreams, not that string theory worked out, but it's quite famous that, so one of the early solutions that started to unify everything, came during a dream. So there is
some of the greatest structures in the world were made without even doing the math on it, really.
Yes.
They were intuitive, like what was Bertoscelli and that dome that he built over that cathedral, and the design of the gearing mechanism to transport all the loads using oxen from the ground, and all of that kind of thing. It was just a guy who was, in a way, like a Tesla, of his time, of understanding the forces of mechanical engineering and recognizing how it should work and imitating nature, or how he interpreted his view of nature. And this is not unlike Tesla, except of course Tesla also had the advantage of actually being an engineer, so that, and a technologist. So that's, Bertoscelli was a goldsmith, but he still was taught in an educated environment. He must have picked up quite a bit of study, and he was obviously fascinated with the Roman architecture and so forth. So anyway.
Not to change the subject, but please. I would like to get Eugene's first response to robotize, I guess, the entire breadth of, in terms of liquid metallic hydrogen, and the idea that you need a lattice to create a thermal spectrum, and the response to apps of gases, because then the system would be performing work on itself, etc. Just like kind of spitball, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, okay. I just want to note that your sound disappears sometimes, so I haven't heard probably 100% of what you said. Do you mean, like, in general, all of the robotized theories on the sun and on the CMB?
Well, yeah, but I mean, he's culminating. He's trying to reach this crescendo of an idea, and he's at a point where in the alchemical secret medicine, we would say that he's compounding the medicine. So it means that it's producing what's called a don, which is a special pill. And this special pill is potent. It has a use. In this case, he's literally found this paper out of thin air that already supports what he's doing. So now he's done all this work. He's got all these hundreds of papers, and he's gone to the conferences. He's had all the hard, and now he's got this evidence. So I would like your response as a physicist to that moment of that arriving. Like, what do you think it hails, or what it means, or etc.?
Well, again, as I've stated multiple times on this podcast, I'm a kind of an anarchist in this regard. So I'm all right with having, several competing theories in my mind at the same time. And actually, it's kind of a fun thing to have. I still have a EU-related blog in Russian, so I have like a long time experience of doing sort of pseudo-scientific journalism, if you like. So, I see a news coming out, I take these papers, analyze them, and so on and so forth, and kind of try to reinterpret them in EU paradigm, right? So I have kind of this experience of changing the perspective. So I can say that Robitaille's theories are kind of cool on their own. Like, they really represent a more or less coherent narrative that could be actually useful to find something new. But whether they are correct, like, in a factual kind of primitive sense, I cannot definitely say that. And with regards to this new paper, for example, that he is describing, again, I have serious doubts that it actually supports his idea. Maybe it actually, is against it, because if this microwave emissions from the oceans are getting scattered by the atmosphere, so they should come from all the angles. So anyway, this antenna should catch them, so to speak. And another thing I found kind of suspicious about this paper is that the author only references himself. So that's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a dirty play, so to speak. So it's, well, I don't know, actually. But it's only concerning this particular paper. Now, on the topic of other works of Robitaille, I feel that this liquid metallic sun idea is actually pretty solid. It's kind of a space for pun here, right? But well, I really like it. That's my point. I really don't see how, for example, a gaseous plasma sun might work. Whereas, I mean, Robitaille has this amazing paper. It's called 40 Lines of Evidence for liquid metallic sun. I've read it like maybe 4 years ago or something, and it's just kind of mind-blowing, how he concentrates this in a huge ball that is really hard to resist. So yeah, this is definitely something to look into. But on the topic of emissions, like his attacks on Kirchhoff's law, and etc. Well, I agree with the point that you cannot have black body emission with liquids, for example, right? Because they have convection currents, they have thermal conduction, so the radiation is not the primary means of heat transfer in such a system. This is completely understandable. But again, I think I've noted this on one of the previous podcasts, that the modern approach to describing the laws of emission rests not on all these assumptions about the nature of the bodies, etc. People actually work with the electromagnetic field itself. So it is assumed that photons are the quanti of this electromagnetic field, which is kind of present everywhere, but it's not everywhere it is excited. So kind of everywhere it's in a vacuum state. So it's a kind of a lowest possible energy state. But if it gets excited in some point, so it has some excess energy, so to speak, then you have a photon at this point, right? And so how the laws of radiation are derived in this case, they basically look at statistics, Bose-Einstein statistics of photons, and from that, this Planckian curve, black body emission curve, it arises pretty much naturally, just from just the very basic math, very basic statistics of photons. So this whole statement that we don't have to have a lattice, I mean, we have to have a lattice, that the claim that Robitaille makes, in order to produce such an emission, it's definitely not supported by the quantum field theory and things like that. So I have doubts here, let's say. But again, how good is this object constructed, so to speak? I mean, the electromagnetic field itself, how applicable are actually the Bose-Einstein statistics? I mean, those are kind of idealizations, as you understand. So are they actually, do they actually work in the real world? That's another question. So maybe Robitaille is actually right after all. So yeah, I don't really know. Yeah, but definitely, kind of summing it all up, I would say that his theories are they provide a very interesting, different perspective on this whole issue. So that's pretty much my view of it.
What do you think, Schiffer?
Oh no, I think it's totally reasonable. I actually have a video, and someone asked me to put it on Sky Scholar, and I said, no, I'm not here to debunk Robitaille, but I have an entire video where I responded to some of the assertions. I think it was that same paper, but I'd have to go to my shelf at work and find it. I'd made a lot of notes, and what I found in the paper that I'd used, I can't remember if it was that paper or another one that was in one of his earlier Sky Scholar videos. I just found a lot of holes in the argumentation, and I ended up using a pot of boiling water. If somebody was on my channel, they could find it, but it's a longer video. It's like 20-some minutes. And I feel that he's got to answer for these vortices that they're finding on the surface of the sun, because I do agree with him that there's a real surface of the sun, but I'm stuck between... by the way, I was reading... Eugene, I was reading The Cosmos Without Gravitation, and I was struck by something that we don't really talk about a lot, which is the low density of the surfaces, or the sun's atmosphere. And I think that is going to play a huge part in determining which model is more correct. As I haven't gone any farther forward than the first section of the abandoned stellar fusion paper, because I got distracted and reading through the history of spectroscopy, and I don't know how I'm going to come down, but I feel like there's probably some kind of hybrid. When you get people that are mostly right, let's say they're 75% right, and you get two people and they're both 75% right, well, you can't add them, because you're going to get 100. So some of what each is saying is going to have to go away, and then there's going to have to be some overlap that comes together to form a cohesive model. And my suspicion is that the surface, the quote real surface, is a real condensed, and that there is a plasma interaction as well, and it's an atmospheric situation. But I don't know enough solar physics. I'm going to have to do a lot of catching up to even get there. I would not be surprised if there was, because Eugene had asked where could Oumuamua possibly have come from the sun. I think with the lattice exclusion model, that's a possibility. But could that mean that the sun is actually, fusing and ejecting heavier material into the core of the sun? I don't know, because the mass is pretty stable. So I don't honestly know enough, and that's why I'm very curious about everybody's different takes.
Well, mine's. I'm a little bit more on Wal Thornhill's camp with most of this, but obviously I would listen to Robitaille. The same situations that I saw that, like we were talking about why something has these bands, why does it have this differential rotation? There's so many good explanations coming from Robitaille that obviously I value his opinion. But there is so much seems to be indicating that, and this is not something Robitaille can really talk about too much because, it's just probably not something that's wise to bring up, but so much would be explained easily if mass was a variable, or there's somehow to vary it, and therefore things like planets and moons and rocks in space, asteroids and stars could all be very similar materials. That would be my guess if I was, in a way that would basically be homogeneous in that sense that they're all versions of the same thing, and that Dr. Donald Scott is right that surface area and current per cubic meter across that surface is the reason that the stars shine, so to speak. So.
Well, that's like. But I was just going to say that brings up the structured atom, but go ahead.
Ed would agree with you.
I wanted to add a kind of relating to what we talked just like 10 minutes before. You're talking about mass, but again, kind of to reinforce my previous point that you can clearly see, I think, that mass only exists basically in Newtonian mechanics. So if Newtonian mechanics is not correct, maybe there is even no such thing as mass. If you use some different theory to describe the motions of bodies in a different way, there will be no place for a concept like mass. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. And this is where we're at. We have getting the new baseline down, but is there even a baseline to get down to? Like how variable are all these things that we consider constants and so forth? I mean, density is pretty standard fare. I mean, many things on this planet, if density were to change, of the properties of different materials were changed that way, many things would break down pretty darn quick. Because we use that that's like, it's just so fundamental. I remember what we talked before about whether or not it would be, is it just mass or is it the force of gravity that's changed? Is G changing, the constant? So much that we don't really know, but we're just on the cusp of. But.
Yeah, this is actually one of the points that I plan to include in my talk at the OTF conference. This famous paper, at least kind of propagandized by myself, that, the G constant seems to change with 5.9 year period. So the funny thing is, remember we talked about neutrons' lifetime measements and how they kind of, the two different methods give different readings. Yes. So I've just took, I've tried to approximate these different readings in the last, measurements made in the last 30 years or so. And I've just kind of brute forcefully put the same type of sine curve that these guys have used in that paper about G constant to the neutron lifetime measurements. And it actually looks very well, So it almost seems like neutron's lifetime might also change with the same 5.9 year period.
And that seems to be related to the Jupiter and the Sun?
Yes, Jupiter's position. And the fun thing is, I think when Jupiter is aligned with the galactic center with respect to the Sun, we get the maximum Yeah, I think so.
You know what that could be? Just off the top of my head, if I'm thinking electrically, this could be like extending the sun's, like the sun's tail. If the sun were to have a tail, and Jupiter being on that side of it because it's so charged, it would sort of change the shape of the current that we're in. We get more or less current depending. It's very interesting. But I definitely have seen that before. That's the same thing. The sidereal day, wherever we point the Earth, tends to have an effect on the decay rates that just get amplified as time goes on. It does not average out. So it's like a bump, so to speak, as we begin to face, the galactic center. These are many different things that seem to appear to relate to that, which wonder if that has to do with the relationship to the current that is feeding the galaxy, if you know what I mean. Which is, just to think that's affecting us from here blows my mind, really.
Or maybe the more local interstellar currents or something. Right. Again, kind of returning to Jim's ideas.
Yeah, that didn't leave my head. No, there's definitely something to do there.